History is not a closed book, but a story still being unearthed. A single misplaced coin or an unfamiliar script carved in stone can force us to rewrite everything we thought we knew about our ancestors. This journey will reveal the astonishing archaeological evidence that proves early civilizations were in contact across vast oceans, completely reshaping the narrative of a divided ancient world. By the end, you will see the map of human history not as separate continents, but as a single, interconnected web. We will investigate how a Roman artifact might have ended up buried in Mexico, and why ancient chicken bones in Chile tell a story of incredible Pacific voyages. How much of our past remains hidden just beneath the surface? Gaze upon the immense, stoic faces of the Olmec colossal heads, carved from single blocks of basalt in the sweltering jungles of Mexico. These stone giants have stared out for over 3,000 years. Their sheer scale is overwhelming, with some standing nearly 10 feet tall and weighing the same as a small truck. But it is their features that have ignited a firestorm of debate for decades. With their broad noses, full lips, and rounded cheeks, they do not look like the typical indigenous art of the Americas. To some observers, they present an uncanny resemblance to faces from across the Atlantic, specifically from the African continent. This single observation challenges the very foundations of our historical timelines. How could such a distinct artistic representation appear in ancient Mexico, centuries before the accepted age of exploration? The mystery only deepens when you consider the sheer effort of their creation. The basalt used for these monolithic portraits was quarried from the Tuxtla Mountains, a journey of over 50 miles through dense, unforgiving jungle. The Olmec people, for all their brilliance, had no wheels, no metal tools, and no domesticated animals like oxen or horses to aid them. The question of how they moved these multi-ton blocks remains one of archaeology's great puzzles. Did they possess a lost technology of transport, or did they receive knowledge from seafaring visitors who had already mastered such feats of engineering? The heads are not crude idols. They are masterpieces of portraiture, each one unique and adorned with distinctive headgear, suggesting they represent powerful, individual rulers. Yet their silent, watchful presence feels like a deliberate message from the past. They do not confirm contact, but they demand an explanation that our standard history books struggle to provide. Their enigmatic smiles seem to guard a secret, a story of global wanderers that we are only now beginning to decipher. Far from the colossal heads of Mexico, a much smaller artifact was unearthed from a Tennessee burial mound, one that would ignite a debate just as fierce. In 1889, during an excavation of a site known as Bat Creek, archaeologists found a small, unassuming slab of sandstone. Etched into its surface was a row of mysterious characters, a script that seemed entirely out of place. For decades, it was catalogued and largely forgotten, written off as a potential forgery or a collection of meaningless marks. But then, in the late 20th century, a fresh set of eyes looked at the inscription, and the quiet stone erupted into a storm of controversy. The characters were not random scratches. They bore a startling, almost direct resemblance to an ancient Paleo-Hebrew script, a writing system used in the Mediterranean world around 2,000 years ago. The most compelling interpretation of the inscription translates to a phrase sacred to the Jewish people for Judah. The implications were staggering. Could this stone be genuine evidence of Mediterranean visitors, perhaps Jewish explorers or Phoenician sailors, reaching the heart of North America long before any European ship ever sailed the ocean blue? The context of its discovery adds a crucial layer of credibility. It was not just lying on the surface, It was carefully excavated from a secure archaeological layer, found alongside traditional wooden ear spools used by the local Cherokee culture, and the site itself was radiocarbon dated to between the 1st and 8th centuries. This was not something dropped by a modern settler. It was buried in antiquity, placed with purpose in a Native American grave. The Bat Creek stone forces a difficult question. Was it a treasured object obtained through trade with distant, seafaring people, or does its presence hint at something even more profound, the integration of those travelers into the local population? This single, palm-sized piece of sandstone challenges the very idea of a hermetically sealed new world, whispering of transoceanic voyages and cultural exchanges that history has entirely forgotten. If these markings are truly what they appear to be, then our map of the ancient world suddenly shrinks, connected by daring journeys we are only beginning to comprehend. A single silver coin, no bigger than a thumbnail, was pulled from the earth at a Native American settlement in Maine. This was the Maine Penny, and its identification sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. Scientific analysis confirmed it was a Norse coin, minted in Norway during the reign of King Olaf Kyrre between 1067 and 1093. That date is crucial, placing it squarely within the era of the known Norse voyages to Vinland, their name for the coast of North America. Yet this coin was found not in Newfoundland, the site of their famous Elance Oaks Meadows settlement, but hundreds of miles to the south, far from any other confirmed Norse site. Its isolation makes it one of the most debated and fascinating artifacts in North American archaeology. So how did a coin from a medieval Norwegian king end up buried in a shell midden on the coast of Maine? There are two compelling and hotly contested explanations. The first is that Norse explorers themselves carried it south, sailing down the coast from their base in Newfoundland, perhaps on a mapping expedition or in search of new resources. This theory paints a picture of Viking ships pushing further into the continent than our limited historical records have shown. The second, and perhaps more likely, explanation involves the vast and sophisticated trade networks that connected indigenous peoples across the continent. This small silver piece, a novelty to its native owners, could have passed from hand to hand over generations, traveling down ancient routes that moved copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf of Mexico, and obsidian from the Rocky Mountains. It might have started its journey in a Norse trader's hand in Newfoundland and ended its journey generations later in Maine, a treasured object whose origin story was long forgotten by the time it was lost. The Maine Penny does not offer a simple answer. Instead, it serves as a physical, metallic whisper. It tells us that the edges of the known world were not sharp boundaries, but porous zones of contact and exchange. This lone coin challenges the tidy narrative of a single Norse settlement, hinting at a more complex, interconnected, and still largely hidden story of early transatlantic encounters. While a coin or a stone can be debated, the sweet potato offers a different kind of proof, one written in its very genes. This humble root vegetable, a cornerstone of diets across Polynesia for centuries, should not have been there before European ships arrived. Its wild ancestor is native to the tropical Americas, a world away across the vast emptiness of the Pacific Ocean. Yet, genetic sequencing tells a clear story. The sweet potato varieties cultivated across remote Pacific islands for generations are undeniably American in origin. They were not carried by European explorers who recorded its presence upon their arrival. The timeline is undeniable. This plant had already completed its incredible journey, taking root in Polynesian soil long before the first Spanish or Portuguese sails appeared on the horizon. So how did it cross thousands of miles of open sea? The answer lies not in random chance, but in the greatest seafaring culture the world has ever known. The Polynesians were not merely island hoppers. They were master navigators who read the stars, the waves, and the flight patterns of birds to guide their massive, double-hulled voyaging canoes across the planet's largest ocean. They deliberately explored, settling islands from Hawaii to New Zealand to Rapa Nui or Easter Island. For them, the ocean was not a barrier, it was a highway. The most logical and thrilling explanation is that these intrepid voyagers successfully reached the western coast of South America. There, they encountered the sweet potato, a nutritious and hardy crop that could be stored for long voyages. They recognized its value, collected it, and carried it back with them across the Pacific, introducing it to their home islands. This was not a one-way trip. The linguistic evidence is just as compelling. The word for sweet potato in many Polynesian languages, like the Maori kumara, bears a striking resemblance to its name in the Quechua language of the Andes, where it was called kumul. This is not a coincidence. It is the echo of a conversation, a shared word that passed between two ancient cultures on a beach somewhere in South America. The sweet potato is a quiet, living monument to that forgotten meeting. It left no carved stones or buried treasure, only a thriving, vital food source that permanently changed the course of Pacific history. This botanical detective story rewrites the narrative from one of isolation to one of connection, proving that the most profound exchanges are sometimes the ones we eat. Rising from a quiet park in Newport, Rhode Island, this circular stone tower has defied simple explanation for generations. Its rugged, mortarless construction stands in stark contrast to the colonial buildings surrounding it, a silent question mark built from local fieldstone. Official records from the 17th century attribute it to Benedict Arnold, an early governor, who supposedly intended it to be a windmill. Yet for many who study its form, this answer feels incomplete, a convenient label placed upon a far more enigmatic structure. The tower's design holds peculiar clues that refuse to fit neatly into the colonial narrative. Its most compelling features are a series of arched fireplaces, not built into the walls but constructed as freestanding pillars in the center of the space. This is not a typical colonial design. In fact, this specific architectural feature finds its closest parallels not in the New World, but in the round churches of medieval Scandinavia, structures like those in Denmark and Sweden that date back to the Viking Age. These Norse churches were often built to a circular plan, with a central hearth or support system that mirrors the Newport Tower's mysterious core. Could this be a coincidence, or is it the architectural fingerprint of a much older group of builders? The construction method itself adds to the mystery. The tower is built using a technique where the stones are carefully laid without mortar, a style that was common in Norse architecture, but was already becoming outdated by the time English colonists arrived in the 17th century. If Governor Arnold built it, why would he choose an antiquated, labor-intensive method unfamiliar to his own culture when simpler designs were available? The tower's location is another piece of the puzzle. It sits on a point of land with a clear, commanding view of the Narragansett Bay. For a seafaring people like the Norse, this would have been an ideal lookout, a potential navigational marker, or even a sacred site. The debate over the Newport Tower is a clash of timelines. To accept a Norse origin is to completely redraw the map of their exploration, suggesting their voyages did not end in Newfoundland, but extended hundreds of miles down the coast into what is now New England. This would mean their contact with the Americas was more extensive and perhaps more enduring than our history books have ever acknowledged. The tower does not give up its secrets easily, standing as a stubborn, physical challenge to our accepted stories, forcing us to wonder just how many layers of history are hidden in plain sight. A different kind of stone, one covered not in mysterious symbols but in a complete and desperate story, emerged from the Brazilian jungle. In 1872, workers quarrying stone near the Paraíba River uncovered a dark, heavy slab. Etched into its surface was a text of 8 lines, a message that, if true, would shatter our understanding of ancient navigation. The inscription was written in an ancient Canaanite script and told a harrowing tale. It claimed to be from a group of explorers from the city of Sidon, a major Phoenician port. They stated that they were part of a fleet of 10 ships that had sailed from the Red Sea, circumnavigated the entire continent of Africa, and then were caught in a terrible storm. Blown wildly off course for 19 days, they finally landed on this distant, unknown shore. The text ends as a plea, a lonely message cast into the wilderness, signed by their leader as a stranger in a hostile land. The date given for this incredible voyage was the 19th year of the reign of King Hiram, which scholars calculate would be around 534 before the Common Era. That is 2,000 years before Columbus even set sail. The implications are almost too vast to comprehend. The Phoenicians were the undisputed masters of the ancient Mediterranean, legendary seafarers who established trade routes from Britain to the Horn of Africa. Their ships, built from famed cedar wood, were the finest of their age. A verified Phoenician landing in Brazil would mean that the greatest maritime civilization of the Old World had not only found the Americas but had left a written record of their disaster. So why is this stone not in every history textbook? From the moment it was revealed, it was shadowed by accusations of being an elaborate hoax. The circumstances of its discovery were murky, and the stone itself was soon lost, leaving only copies of the inscription. Linguists have long debated the text, with some pointing to oddities in the language, potential anachronisms that suggest a forger's hand. It was almost too perfect, a storyteller made to fit the known capabilities of Phoenician sailors and the timeline of a specific king. Yet the very nature of the message gives one pause. A clever forger would likely have written a tale of triumph and discovery, of riches and easy conquest. The Paraíba inscription tells a story of failure, of being lost and desperate. It reads not as a boast but as a genuine cry from the edge of the world. This stone represents the ultimate historical cliffhanger, a piece of evidence that is too explosive to ignore yet too problematic to fully accept. It forces us to confront a difficult question. Is our skepticism based on solid evidence, or is it a reflex, an unwillingness to rewrite a history we thought was settled? The Paraíba stone, real or not, holds a mirror to our own assumptions about the past, challenging us to consider just how far the long arms of ancient empires may have truly reached. Far out in the Pacific, a powerful river of warm water, the Kuroshio Current, sweeps relentlessly eastward from the coast of Asia. It is a natural conveyor belt, a maritime highway that, if followed, empties directly onto the shores of the Americas. And it is here, in the shallow waters off Palos Verdes, California, that a collection of strange, donut-shaped stones rests on the ocean floor. These are not ordinary rocks. Their uniform, rounded shape with a central hole is unmistakable. They are shijai, stone anchors identical to those used for centuries by Chinese fishermen. Pulled from the water in the 1970s, these heavy artifacts ignited an immediate firestorm. Could they be physical proof of a Chinese voyage to the New World, decades or even centuries before the Spanish ever arrived? The official, skeptical explanation is that they are simply natural sandstone concretions formed by geological chance, but for those who study them, their story is written in their design and their location. They are found clustered together as if a single ship, a massive Chinese junk, had dropped them all in one fateful moment. A vessel caught in a storm might jettison its heavy stone anchors to stay afloat, leaving this cryptic trail on the seabed. The journey they imply is one of almost unimaginable scale. A Chinese ship, perhaps blown off course or on a deliberate expedition, could have ridden the Kuroshio Current across the vast Pacific, a journey of thousands of miles. This is not mere fantasy. It aligns with the known maritime prowess of China, a civilization that built colossal treasure ships and sent vast armadas across the Indian Ocean. Why could one of their vessels not have ventured east, pushed by curiosity or by a storm, to finally make landfall on the golden coast of California? The stones themselves are silent, but other clues whisper in support. Ancient Chinese texts describe a mythical land of plenty called Fusang, far to the east. Some scholars see descriptions in these texts that could fit the geography and flora of the Americas. Even more compelling are the biological echoes. The sudden appearance of the bottle gourd in Asia and certain chicken breeds in the Americas present genetic puzzles that a chance voyage could solve. These submerged anchors are more than just rocks. They are a hypothesis carved in stone, a challenge to our maps. They ask us to consider a world where the Pacific was not an impenetrable void, but a bridge traversed by the most daring sailors, whose stories were lost to everything except the enduring memory of the stones they left behind. Another farmer, another field, another stone that refused to stay silent. In 1898, a Swedish immigrant named Olof Oman was clearing trees on his farm in Kensington, Minnesota, when his roots snagged on a large, flat slab of greywacke stone. What he unearthed was not just a rock, but a dramatic message carved in runes, a cryptic telegram from the 14th century. The inscription told a harrowing story. It claimed that a group of 8 Swedes and 22 Norwegians on an exploration journey from Vinland had camped here. The text goes on to describe a tragic skirmish, stating that 10 men were red with blood and dead. The date given was 1362, a full 130 years after the Norse settlement at Elant's Ox Meadows was believed to have been abandoned. This was not a simple marker. It was a narrative of disaster and survival deep in the heart of North America. If genuine, the Kensington Runestone would completely rewrite the story of Norse presence in the New World, suggesting their expeditions were not brief coastal visits but daring penetrations into the continent's vast interior, and that they occurred centuries later than anyone had imagined. The stone immediately became a battleground for experts. The runic alphabet used contained characters that some scholars argued were unknown in the 14th century, marks that seemed to point to a modern forger's hand. They suggested that Oman himself, a literate Scandinavian, could have carved it as a hoax, yet other researchers have fought back with equally compelling evidence. They point to the stone's geology, noting that the weathering in the carved inscriptions appears ancient, not freshly cut. They analyze the language itself, arguing that the specific phrasing and grammatical quirks are not mistakes, but authentic nuances of a medieval Scandinavian dialect that a 19th century farmer would have had no way of knowing. This stone is more than an artifact. It is a symbol of the fierce struggle between established academic history and the powerful, tantalizing pull of an alternative past. It forces us to ask a difficult question. Is our skepticism a careful, scientific position, or is it a reflexive defense of a historical narrative we are unwilling to change? The Kensington Runestone does not offer easy answers, only a deeply carved challenge, a ghost story from the Minnesota soil that continues to haunt the edges of our accepted history. This small terracotta head from Mexico seems to stare back at us from the heart of the classical world. Unearthed from a burial at the Calixtlahuaca site, this miniature sculpture is no larger than a fist, yet its stylistic identity is colossal and unmistakable. With its distinctive beard and the characteristic hairstyle known as a Parthian cap, the artifact is a near-perfect match for Roman art from the 2nd or 3rd century of the Common Era. The implications are staggering, but the context of its discovery is what turns a wild theory into a serious archaeological puzzle. This head was not found lying loosely in a field. It was excavated from a sealed, undisturbed layer beneath a Mesoamerican pyramid, a context that dates it firmly to a time long before any Spanish ship ever landed. How does a Roman artifact end up cemented under an ancient American pyramid? The most logical explanation is that the object itself is genuinely old, placed there centuries ago by people who possessed it. So how did it cross the ocean? One possibility is a ship, perhaps a Roman vessel blown catastrophically off course by Atlantic storms, its sole surviving relic washing ashore or being traded inland. Yet another, more plausible theory involves a vast, interlocking web of trade. Objects of immense value and curiosity could travel incredible distances through countless hands, moving from Roman Europe to the Vikings, and from there across the northern Atlantic, or perhaps down African trade routes we have yet to fully understand. This tiny head forces a monumental question. Were the ancient oceans highways for accidental voyages and deliberate exchanges that our history has entirely failed to record? It suggests a world where a Roman coin or a terracotta figure could, over generations, journey from a workshop in the Mediterranean to a tomb in Mexico, carried not by a single intrepid explorer, but by a chain of human curiosity that connected the planet long before we thought it was possible. A chicken bone can rewrite a continent's history. On the arid coast of Chile, at a site called El Arenal, archaeologists unearthed a collection of seemingly ordinary chicken bones. Their significance, however, was anything but ordinary. Radiocarbon dating placed these bones squarely in the 13th and 14th centuries, a full 100 to 200 years before the first Spanish conquistadors ever set foot in the Americas. This timeline alone was startling, but the real revelation came from the laboratory. Genetic analysis of the bones revealed a truth that echoed across the Pacific. These chickens were not European. Their DNA was a perfect match for ancient chicken breeds from the islands of Polynesia. This was not a case of a seed floating on the waves or an object traded beyond memory of its origin. This was the arrival of a living, breathing, domesticated animal. Chickens cannot swim across an ocean. They had to be carried deliberately on a voyage. This single, fragile bone is a fossilized receipt for the most daring delivery in human history, proving that Polynesian voyagers not only reached the Americas, but they came to stay, at least long enough to establish their livestock on a new continent. Think of the implications of that journey. It means a massive, ocean-going voyaging canoe, stocked with provisions for a multi-week expedition, also had a coop of live chickens clucking on its deck. These were not castaways, they were colonists carrying the essentials of their culture and their sustenance. The chicken bone is the companion to the sweet potato, a two-part harmony of evidence. One shows the transfer of plants, the other the transfer of a complete, managed food source. Together, they paint a picture not of a chance encounter, but of sustained, intentional contact. The Polynesians did not just stumble upon South America, they integrated with it, sharing their resources and likely taking new ones back with them on the return voyage. This tiny, unassuming bone is a monumental clue. It speaks of a Pacific world that was interconnected, a vast aquatic continent where cultures met and mingled long before European maps ever acknowledged its existence. A map drawn 2 centuries before its time holds a secret many wish had stayed lost. Published in 1558, the Zeno Map claims to be a copy of a far older chart, one detailing the North Atlantic voyages of 2 Venetian brothers, Niccolo and Antonio Zeno, in the late 1300s. Its coastlines are a shocking preview of geography that should have been unknown to European cartographers. There is Greenland, depicted with a shape that would not be officially mapped for generations. And to its southwest, lands labeled as Estatiland and Drogeo bear a striking resemblance to modern-day Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. The map is not just a drawing, it is a statement, asserting that someone had sailed these waters and mapped these shores long before Columbus ever convinced a queen to fund his journey. The most tantalizing figure on the map is not a place but a person, a prince named Zichmni. Some historians have painstakingly pieced together evidence suggesting this Zichmni was Henry Sinclair, the Earl of Orkney, a Scottish nobleman with Norse ancestry and a fleet of ships at his command. The narrative woven by the map's text tells of Sinclair leading an expedition across the Atlantic, exploring these new lands and establishing a settlement. If this story is true, it rewrites the entire opening chapter of European contact with the Americas, placing a Scottish earl on its shores nearly 100 years before Columbus. Yet from the moment it was published, the Zeno Map was shrouded in controversy. Skeptics argue it is an elaborate 16th century forgery, created to bolster Venetian prestige by claiming a prior discovery. They point to strange, almost mythical islands on the chart and question why, if such a voyage occurred, there is no other surviving record of it in European archives. But defenders counter with the map's profound accuracy in certain areas, details that would have been impossible to guess without first-hand knowledge. How could a forger have so accurately depicted the fjords of Greenland or the intricate coastline of Newfoundland? The Zeno Map is a cartographic ghost, a phantom from a lost voyage that challenges our certainty. It forces us to wonder how much knowledge was gained and then lost in the great ages of exploration. Was this map suppressed, its origins forgotten in the political rush to credit Spain with the New World's discovery? Or does it stand as the sole surviving testament to a journey that history chose to forget, a secret kept by an old Venetian family until the world was finally ready to question its own story? The rocky coastline of Maine guards another set of cryptic stones, unearthed in 1971 near a place called Spirit Pond. 3 slate fragments, each carved with runic inscriptions and a crude map, seem to promise a direct window into the Norse experience in the New World. One stone even appeared to tell a story of conflict and Christian faith, mentioning a journey and the need for a priest. Here, at last, was potential written confirmation of the sagas, found not in the Midwest but on the very shores the Vikings would have explored. Yet almost as soon as they were revealed, a cloud of academic doubt descended. The runes themselves were the problem. Experts pointed out that the letter forms were a jumbled mix, combining runes from different centuries and even incorporating modern punctuation. The language used was not a pure medieval Norse, but a strange pastiche that felt constructed, as if someone had cobbled it together from old dictionaries. To the majority of scholars, the Spirit Pond stones were a clear, if clever, modern forgery. The debate over these stones is about more than just their authenticity. It reveals the powerful human longing to touch the past, to find that one piece of evidence that makes the legends real. This desire can sometimes outpace the meticulous, often slow, process of scientific authentication. The stones serve as a permanent cautionary tale, a reminder that the thrill of discovery must always be tempered by rigorous scrutiny. They force us to walk a fine line, balancing our hope for a rewritten history with the unwavering standards of proof. Could they be a genuine message misunderstood due to our own incomplete knowledge of Norse expeditions? Or are they a mirror reflecting not the world of the Vikings, but our own deep wish to connect with them? A massive boulder rests in the New Mexico desert, its surface carved with ancient words that feel profoundly out of place. Known as the Los Lunas Decalogue stone, This immense rock is inscribed with what appears to be an abbreviated version of the Ten Commandments, written in a form of Paleo-Hebrew. The sheer scale of the inscription is overwhelming, a full religious text etched not on a portable tablet, but onto the unyielding landscape itself. If this monument is authentic, it tells a story far grander and more troubling than a simple shipwreck or a lost coin. It suggests the presence of an entire Hebrew-speaking community living deep in the American Southwest centuries ago. The physical evidence lies in the patina, a natural coating of desert varnish that has formed over the carved letters. This mineral crust suggests the inscription is not a recent addition, but something that has weathered the elements for a very long time. Yet this single piece of evidence is also the source of fierce debate. Could a skilled forger have created the inscription and then artificially aged it to mimic centuries of exposure? The stone's remote location adds another layer of mystery. It was not discovered in an archaeological dig, but found on a lonely stretch of land known to locals for generations. This lack of a clear, documented discovery context makes it a nightmare for traditional archaeologists to verify. The implications of its authenticity are earth-shattering. This is not merely about contact, it is about colonization, about a group carrying their most sacred laws across an ocean and into a new world. It proposes a connection to the ancient Israelites that would rewrite not just exploration history, but the very religious narrative of the continent. Who were these people? Were they a lost tribe, a group of exiles, or daring explorers who established a foothold in this distant land? The stone offers no names, no dates, only its monumental, silent testimony. It stands as a direct challenge, forcing us to wonder if the whispers of global connection were not just sporadic visits, but the echoes of forgotten settlements, their stories written in stone and waiting for the desert to finally give them a voice. Deep in the woods of Massachusetts, a stone beehive is built into a hillside. The Upton Chamber is a perfect dome of corbelled stone, each layer carefully set to curve inward until the walls meet at a single capstone overhead, all achieved without a single drop of mortar. Its form is an ancient one, a design replicated in thousands of stone huts or clochans scattered across the Irish and Scottish countryside. Structures that date back to the early medieval period and are attributed to Celtic monks and hermits. To stand inside its cool, dark interior is to be transported across an ocean, a sensation that raises an immediate and powerful question. What is a Celtic beehive hut doing in the heart of New England? The conventional explanation labels it a colonial root cellar, built by a 17th or 18th century farmer. But this answer feels deeply inadequate to those who study its construction. Colonial root cellars were typically simple, rectangular pits dug for pure utility. The Upton Chamber is something else entirely. It is a masterpiece of dry stone masonry, a sophisticated architectural tradition that requires immense skill to balance gravitational forces and ensure the structure's stability over centuries. This is not the work of a settler hastily storing potatoes. It is the work of a builder who knew this specific, complex form intimately. The precision of its corbelling is a cultural fingerprint, one that points away from the colonial world and toward a much older transatlantic tradition. Could this chamber be the remnant of a Celtic voyage, perhaps Irish monks known as the Papar, who some sagas suggest were seeking solitude across the sea? Or does its lineage stretch back even further to the Phoenicians, who also employed corbelled architecture and whose seafaring prowess we have already questioned? The Upton Chamber does not offer a name or a date. It simply stands, an architectural anomaly that refuses to fit our tidy historical boxes. It forces us to look at the New England landscape not as a blank slate for European colonization, but as a palimpsest, a parchment scraped clean and written over many times, where the faint, ghostly writing of much earlier visitors might still be visible. This stone dome is more than a shelter. It is a silent argument for a forgotten chapter, a place where the boundary between the old world and the new seems to dissolve into shadow and stone. These stone giants of Baalbek are not alone in their impossible scale. Across the world, high in the Andes Mountains of Peru, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman presents a similar, breathtaking puzzle. Here, massive blocks of limestone, some weighing over 100 tons, are fitted together with a precision that defies belief. The stones are not simply stacked. They are intricately carved with complex angles and interlocking joints that snake along the walls in a zigzag pattern, all without a single drop of mortar. The fit is so perfect that for centuries, locals said not even a piece of paper could be slipped between them. How could a culture without the wheel, without iron tools, achieve such a masterful, seamless fit? The answer seems to lie in a profound understanding of stone itself, a knowledge of how to soften, shape, and manipulate rock in ways we can scarcely comprehend today. Even more telling is the site of Ollantaytambo, another Peruvian marvel. Here, massive red granite blocks were quarried from a mountainside across a valley, transported down a steep slope, and then hauled across a raging river before being lifted into place high on a fortified terrace. The scale of this operation is staggering, a logistical nightmare that would challenge modern engineers. The parallels to Baalbek are undeniable. At both sites, we see cultures moving stones that we would struggle to move even with our most powerful machinery. They employed similar techniques, using precisely cut foundations, intricate fitting, and an apparent mastery of leverage and transport that has been lost to time. So how do we explain this? One possibility is convergent evolution, the idea that different cultures, when faced with the same fundamental challenge of moving immense weight, independently arrived at the same brilliant solutions. It is the architectural equivalent of different animals evolving wings for flight. Yet the similarities are so specific, so deeply rooted in an understanding of stone and mass, that another theory whispers from these walls. Could this be evidence of a shared, lost knowledge, a school of engineering that once circled the globe? Perhaps a seafaring culture possessing these advanced techniques carried this knowledge across the oceans, sharing it with the master builders of other lands. Or maybe, just maybe, this points to a much older, common source, a foundational civilization whose technological legacy was adopted and adapted by later cultures, each leaving their own distinct mark on stones that were meant to last for eternity. These sites do not give us a name or a map. They only present the evidence, a global language written in stone, asking us to reconsider the very origins of human ingenuity. The preserved body of an Egyptian priestess holds a secret locked in her very cells. During the 1990s, a team of German researchers conducting toxicological studies on ancient Egyptian mummies made a discovery that defied all logic. Deep within the hair, skin, and bone samples of these individuals, who died centuries before the Common Era, they found the unmistakable chemical signatures of two specific substances, nicotine and cocaine. The implications were, and remain, explosive. Both tobacco and the coca plant are biologically American, native solely to the Western Hemisphere. They should have been completely unknown in Africa or Europe until after Columbus' voyages in the 1490s. Yet here was hard, scientific evidence that these powerful stimulants were present in the bodies of ancient Egyptians, people who lived and died over 2,000 years before a single Spanish caravel ever sailed. How is this possible? The most direct explanation is also the most revolutionary, a theory of pre-Columbian transatlantic contact that has become known as the Cocaine Mummies hypothesis. It suggests that a trade route, however sporadic or accidental, must have existed across the Atlantic, allowing these New World plants to find their way into the hands of Old World societies. Imagine a Phoenician merchant ship blown off course, eventually making landfall in the Americas. There, they would have encountered local peoples using these plants for ritual and medicinal purposes. Recognizing their value, perhaps as stimulants for long voyages or as rare luxury items, they could have brought small, precious quantities back with them to the Mediterranean. From there, these exotic substances could have traveled down the Nile, becoming a rare and powerful commodity for the Egyptian elite, something so valuable it was included in the burial preparations for a priestess, meant to accompany her into the afterlife. Of course, such a bold claim faces intense and legitimate skepticism. Critics argue forcefully for contamination, suggesting the mummies, stored in modern museums, could have been exposed to these substances from 19th-century curators who were tobacco users or from accidental contact during handling. Others propose that perhaps there were now extinct Old World plants that produced similar chemical compounds, plants that have since vanished from the historical record. Yet the researchers counter that their procedures were meticulously designed to prevent contamination, and that the molecules found are uniquely specific to the American tobacco and coca plants. This is not a single anomalous result, but a pattern found across multiple mummies from different museum collections. So where does that leave us? This evidence does not necessarily mean that pharaohs sent fleets to Brazil. It points instead to a world of complexity we are only beginning to grasp, where objects, ideas, and even drugs could travel vast distances through interconnected, cascading trade networks. A single ship making a single voyage could have introduced a substance that then became a coveted treasure, passed from hand to hand across continents until its origin was a forgotten legend. The cocaine mummies force us to confront a haunting possibility that the ancient world was far more intimately connected than our maps have ever shown, and that the story of global exchange began not in 1492, but in the whispers of a much older and far more daring age of exploration. Deep within the crypts of the Hathor Temple at Dendera, a stone panel presents a puzzle that seems to defy its own time. The relief shows a strange, elongated object, bulbous at one end and tapering to a point from which a snake emerges. This form is cradled inside a vessel, connected by a cable-like tendril to a box gripped by a kneeling figure, while a baboon stands near by holding two knives toward the snake. To the modern eye, the resemblance is uncanny. It looks for all the world like a colossal light bulb, complete with a filament and an electrical cord plugged into a power source. The mainstream and accepted interpretation is one of profound myth, not machinery. Egyptologists identify this as a complex symbol of creation, showing a lotus flower, the symbol of birth, giving rise to a snake, representing the sun god emerging at dawn. The entire scene is a spiritual metaphor for the dawn of a new day, a story written in stone. Yet, the alternative theory asks a simple, disruptive question. What if we are reading it too metaphorically? What if the ancient artists were depicting a piece of advanced, functional technology that they possessed but we have since forgotten? The details are eerily specific. The snake is held rigidly inside the bulb, not coiling naturally. The cable connects to a distinct box, the jed pillar, which is often interpreted as a symbol of stability, but in this context could be seen as a battery or generator. The baboon with knives could be a warning of the device's power. This is not just a question of art history. If this carving represents a real device, it would mean that the concept of electricity and its practical application was known thousands of years before Benjamin Franklin's kite or Thomas Edison's lab. It forces us to reconsider the very roots of invention. Could such knowledge have been developed independently and then lost in some cataclysm, a dark age that erased not just empires but entire fields of science. Or, even more provocatively, does this relief hint at a shared technological legacy, a piece of lost wisdom that might have traveled along the same forgotten routes as the cocaine in the mummies or the Roman head in Mexico? The Dendera relief stands at the crossroads of two entirely different worlds. In one, it is a beautiful and sophisticated spiritual allegory. In the other, it is a technical diagram waiting to be understood. This single carving illuminates the fundamental tension at the heart of all these mysteries. Are we projecting our modern expectations onto the past, or are we finally learning to see the past for what it truly was, a place of innovation and connection that we are only now beginning to recognize? Drawn in 1513, a Turkish admiral's map presents a geographical paradox that has never been fully resolved. The Piri Reis Map, a fragment of a larger world chart, is astonishingly precise in its rendering of the eastern coast of South America. Yet it is the landmass to the south that ignites a firestorm of debate, a territory labeled and shaped in a way that seems to mirror the northern coastline of Antarctica. This is impossible according to our history books. The frozen continent was not officially sighted until 1820, over 300 years after this map was inked onto gazelle skin. So what are we looking at? Admiral Piri Reis himself provided a crucial clue in his notes, stating that he compiled his map from numerous source charts, some of which dated back to the time of Alexander the Great. This admission opens a door to a breathtaking possibility. The map may not be a product of 16th century discovery, but a medieval copy of a much older atlas, a relic preserving the cartographic knowledge of a forgotten seafaring civilization. The most contentious detail is the apparent depiction of Antarctica's Queen Maud Land, but without its present-day mile-thick ice cap. For the coastline to be mapped in such a way, the original survey would have needed to occur in a remote epoch when the continent was free of ice, a period that climatologists tell us ended thousands of years ago. This suggests a cycle of human civilization, a lost epoch of exploration where ancient mariners possessed the skill and courage to chart the entire globe, their knowledge surviving only in cryptic copies like this one. The map is a ghost, a phantom coastline from a world we thought was undiscovered. It forces us to ask whether our own age of exploration was merely a rediscovery, and if the greatest journeys ever made were erased by the slow, patient work of time and ice. Within a vault at Yale University lies a book that has defied every attempt to read it. The Voynich Manuscript is a 240-page codex from the 15th century, filled from edge to edge with a script that belongs to no known language. Its pages are a gallery of the impossible, illustrated with plants that twist into unfamiliar shapes, astronomical charts of constellations we cannot name, and networks of pipes where nude figures bathe in vibrant green fluids. For centuries, cryptographers and scholars have tried to crack its code, treating it as a complex cipher, but every effort has ended in failure. The text does not yield because it may not be a code at all, but a written language for which the key has been utterly lost. Among its most perplexing features are the hundreds of botanical drawings. These are not stylized versions of European herbs. They are organisms with bizarre morphologies, leaves that spiral in impossible ways, and root systems that look like something from a dream. One compelling theory suggests that these are not fantasies. What if they are accurate depictions of flora from the American continents, drawn by a European artist who had seen specimens brought back by a secret, unrecorded voyage? Imagine a single ship blown off course, returning with pressed flowers and sketches of a new world's botany. The artist, tasked with documenting these wonders, would have no familiar reference points, leading to illustrations that look alien to us because the plants themselves were alien to him. The manuscript's astronomical section adds another layer, featuring celestial diagrams that do not align with the night sky of the Mediterranean, but may represent the heavens as seen from the southern hemisphere. This is not just a random collection of oddities, it is a systematic, encyclopedic work. Someone went to immense effort to compile this knowledge, and then to hide it in plain sight within an unreadable language. The Voynich Manuscript is more than a puzzle, it is a silent witness. It stands as a beautiful, frustrating testament to the possibility that knowledge of distant lands was circulating in European courts and monasteries long before Columbus, encoded not by conspiracy, but by the simple, profound barrier of having no shared words to describe the wonders of a new world. High on the remote, wind-swept plateaus of the Bayan Kara Ula Mountains, a story was unearthed that pushes the boundaries of what we consider possible. In 1938, a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pu-te reportedly entered a system of caves and made an astonishing discovery. Scattered across the cave floor were hundreds of stone discs, each roughly 9 inches in diameter with a perfect hole in the center, resembling strange, ancient phonograph records. But the true mystery was etched onto their surfaces, a spiral groove that, upon closer inspection, was found to be a continuous line of tiny, barely visible hieroglyphic characters. The story that emerged from their supposed translation is the stuff of science fiction. The inscriptions were said to tell a tragic tale of a group of beings called the Dropa, whose spacecraft crashed in the inaccessible mountains thousands of years ago. Stranded and unable to repair their vessel, these visitors allegedly integrated with the local tribes, their story preserved only on these cryptic stone discs. This narrative instantly challenges our deepest assumptions, not just about global contact, but about our very place in the cosmos. Could this be evidence of extraterrestrial contact in humanity's distant past? Mainstream archaeology has universally dismissed the Dropa Stones. No major institution has ever examined a confirmed disk, and the original discoverer and the discs themselves have faded into obscurity, leaving only photographs and second-hand accounts. Skeptics argue the entire episode is a layered hoax, a misidentification of common-buy discs, which are circular jade artifacts found in Chinese cultures, or simply a fantastic story born from the isolation and high altitude. Yet the persistence of the legend speaks to a powerful human desire. It represents the ultimate fringe of these historical mysteries, where the search for connection leaps from across oceans to across star systems. These stones force us to confront a difficult question: where is the line between a forgotten history and a compelling myth? Are we looking at a profound truth dismissed too quickly, or are we seeing a reflection of our own longing for the cosmos to be part of our ancient story? The Dropa Stones, real or not, remain a powerful symbol of that endless curiosity, a reminder that some mysteries are carved not just in stone, but in the very stars we gaze upon. This ancient site in Turkey shatters the very foundations of our historical narrative. Göbekli Tepe is a sprawling complex of massive, T-shaped stone pillars arranged in great circles, a project that began over 12,000 years ago. That is 6,000 years older than Stonehenge, built at a time when humanity was supposedly composed of small, nomadic bands of hunter-gatherers. Yet here is architecture on a monumental scale, requiring organized labor, sophisticated planning, and symbolic thought. The pillars themselves are masterpieces covered in intricate carvings of animals, from scorpions and foxes to soaring birds, a menagerie frozen in stone. The sheer effort involved is staggering. These multi-ton limestone blocks were quarried from local bedrock and moved without the wheel or domesticated animals to be erected in precise formations. This was not the work of a simple society. It forces a revolutionary question: What if civilization, the impulse to build grand communal projects, came first, and agriculture was merely a later development to support it? The standard model of history that farming allowed humans to settle down and only then develop complex culture is turned completely on its head by this one site. Perhaps it was the need to gather hundreds of workers and feed them that actually spurred the first experiments with cultivating wild grains. The implications ripple outward across the globe. The symbolism etched into these pillars, the abstract T-shapes, the precise animal iconography, feels like a sophisticated language of belief. Could this have been the cradle, a central point from which knowledge, myths, and even architectural concepts spread? The carvings at Göbekli Tepe do not just depict animals, they tell a story, one that may have traveled with early seafarers and migrants, influencing the myths and monuments of cultures yet to come. This is not merely a temple, it is a ghost, the remnant of a lost cultural sphere so ancient that its name is forgotten, its people unknown, leaving only these silent, towering stones to challenge everything we thought we knew about our own ascent. From the silent, wind-swept stones of Göbekli Tepe, we jump forward to a device of breathtaking complexity, one that seems to have fallen through a crack in time. Recovered from a Roman-era shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera, this corroded lump of bronze and wood sat in a museum for decades before anyone understood its true nature. When it was finally examined with X-ray technology, the world saw it for what it was, an intricate clockwork universe in a box. The Antikythera Mechanism is a web of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, housed in a wooden case no larger than a shoebox. It is an analog computer from the 2nd century before the Common Era, a machine designed to predict the movements of the heavens with stunning accuracy. By turning a hand crank, the user could calculate the positions of the sun and moon, predict lunar and solar eclipses, and even track the cycles of the ancient Olympic Games. The gears moved in perfect mathematical harmony, modeling the irregular orbits of celestial bodies with a sophistication that would not be matched again until the mechanical clocks of the 14th century in Europe. This was not a toy or a curiosity. It was a product of a highly advanced scientific culture, a fragment of a lost world of Greek engineering and astronomy that we never knew existed. Its very existence is a profound shock to our historical timeline. How could such advanced technology simply vanish for over 1,000 years? What other marvels of mechanics and understanding were lost in the fires of burning libraries and the collapse of empires? The mechanism forces us to consider a terrifying possibility, that scientific knowledge is not a straight, upward line, but a cycle of discovery, loss, and rediscovery. This single device, salvaged from the seafloor, whispers of an entire school of technological thought that has been completely erased from the record. It makes you wonder if the astronomical alignments we see in ancient monuments across the globe, from Stonehenge to the pyramids, were not just mystical observations, but the practical application of a sophisticated and now vanished science of the stars. These immense drawings sprawl across the arid plains of Peru, so vast that their full form only emerges when you rise high above the desert floor. The Nazca Lines are a gallery of giants depicting spiders, hummingbirds, monkeys, and geometric shapes etched into the rusty earth by removing the dark surface stones to reveal the pale sand beneath. Their sheer scale is humbling, with some figures stretching longer than the Empire State Building laid on its side. For generations, their purpose has been a riddle whispered by the wind. The local Nazca culture undoubtedly created them, and many archaeologists see them as sacred pathways, walked during spiritual ceremonies to call upon the gods for water in this unforgiving landscape. Yet the lines possess an almost mathematical precision. their long, straight paths and perfect curves holding their form for centuries, as if their true audience was always meant to be someone or something looking down from above. This has led to a theory that soars into the speculative, the idea that these were runways or landing signals for ancient aircraft, perhaps even vehicles of extraterrestrial visitors. While this captures the imagination, it overlooks a more plausible yet equally profound terrestrial explanation. What if these colossal drawings were not for gods from the sky, but for sailors on the sea? Imagine a master navigator from a distant land, guiding his vessel along the Pacific coast. He knows that to find a specific bay or a hidden river mouth, a crucial stop on a long-forgotten trade route, he must align his view of the coastal mountains with a specific landmark far inland. From his vantage point on the ocean, the sprawling animal figures and intersecting lines on the distant plateau could have acted as a massive, fixed navigational chart. A distinct whale glyph might point the way to a rich whaling cove, while a perfect triangle could signal a safe freshwater source. The lines, when viewed from specific elevated points along the coast or from the sea itself with the aid of the rising or setting sun, could have formed a recognizable code, a series of landmarks so large they could not be missed. This transforms the lines from purely ritual art into a functional, geographic language. They challenge us to expand our understanding of ancient ingenuity, suggesting a world where the desert itself was a map, and the sky was not a barrier, but a page on which directions for global travelers were permanently inscribed. What other messages, written on the very skin of the earth, are we still failing to read because we have forgotten how to see from the perspective of those who first made the journey? The humid Florida air hangs heavy around a garden of stone giants, all carved and placed by one man, Edward Leedskalnin, a man barely 5 feet tall and weighing just 100 pounds, single-handedly built Coral Castle. Over 28 years, he quarried, carved, and positioned over 1,000 tons of oolite limestone, creating a complex of massive sculptures, walls, and a revolving 9-ton gate so perfectly balanced a child could push it open. He worked alone, almost always at night, shrouding his methods in complete secrecy. When curious onlookers pressed him, he would offer only a cryptic smile and say he understood the laws of weight and leverage, claiming to have rediscovered the building secrets of the ancient Egyptians who raised the pyramids. He spoke of harnessing the forces of magnetism and the Earth's own energy. One witness reported seeing him work, stating the massive blocks seemed to move as if they were hydrogen balloons, gliding into place with an impossible, weightless grace. This is not an ancient site, but a modern one constructed in the first half of the 20th century. Its existence proves that the principles behind the world's most baffling megalithic sites were not necessarily the product of thousands of slaves or lost super-civilizations. Here was one man with no formal education, achieving what modern engineering would require cranes and heavy machinery to replicate. Coral Castle stands as a living, breathing challenge. It dares us to consider that the greatest secret of the ancients was not a physical technology of pulleys and levers that we have forgotten how to build, but a mental one, a profound understanding of natural forces that we have forgotten how to see. If one man could unlock this knowledge in the 1920s, how many others throughout history might have done the same, leaving their own stone puzzles for us to ponder? A simple clay pot no larger than a hand sits quietly in a museum display. Found in the outskirts of modern Baghdad, this unassuming vessel is accompanied by a copper cylinder and an iron rod. To the untrained eye, it is merely a collection of ancient scraps, but when these three components are assembled and the jar is filled with a common acidic substance like vinegar or wine, something remarkable happens. A faint electrical charge just over 1 volt is generated, This is the Baghdad Battery, and its existence proposes a question that hums with latent energy. Did certain ancient cultures not only stumble upon electricity, but harness it for practical use? The artifacts date from the Parthian or Sassanid period, a span of nearly 1,000 years, suggesting this was not a one-time accident but a technology with a history. What would they have needed such a small, consistent current for? The most compelling theory points to electroplating, the process of using electricity to bond a thin layer of a precious metal, like gold, onto a less valuable object such as silver. Archaeologists have long been puzzled by the exquisite gilding on some artifacts from the region, a finish so fine and uniform it defied explanation by known ancient methods. The answer may have been in this jar all along. An artisan could have connected a series of these cells to create a stronger current, dipping a piece of jewelry into a solution and using the electrical charge to deposit a flawless, microscopic layer of gold. This was not about lighting up cities, but about perfecting art and creating objects of mesmerizing beauty and value. The implications of this are profound. It means the fundamental principles of electrochemistry were understood and applied centuries before they were officially discovered in the modern era. This small jar represents a spark of knowledge that flickered and then was seemingly extinguished, its purpose forgotten as empires fell. It forces us to wonder what other pockets of practical science existed in the ancient world, technologies that were never written down in grand texts but were passed from master to apprentice in workshops now turned to dust. Could this understanding of electrical current have traveled along trade routes, another piece of a global puzzle we are only beginning to assemble? These scattered artifacts form a pattern when you finally step back to see the whole picture. A Norse coin in Maine, a Polynesian chicken bone in Chile, a Roman head in Mexico. These are not random historical glitches. They are individual threads in a vast, intricate tapestry of human connection, a story woven across oceans long before our history books claimed such journeys were possible. This emerging narrative forcefully challenges the traditional, Eurocentric tale of discovery that places one man and one year at the center of the global story. In its place, we find a far more compelling and complex reality, a world of multiple, independent points of contact, different cultures from the master navigators of Polynesia to the ambitious seafarers of the Mediterranean, reached the Americas at different times, not as conquerors in a single age of exploration, but as participants in a much older, slower, and more mysterious age of encounter. The past is not a sealed book written in stone. It is an active, ongoing excavation, a conversation between what we think we know and what the earth reluctantly reveals. Let these mysteries be more than just fascinating clues. Let them be an invitation to look at the entire map of our world, not as a record of separation, but as a grand, interconnected web. Every coastline becomes a potential landing site, every ocean a highway, and every strange artifact a whisper from a journey we are only now beginning to remember. Which of these clues resonates most deeply with you? Share your thoughts on the most compelling piece of this puzzle in the comments, and subscribe to continue this journey into the unknown with us.